No, this video title is not fake. It sounds unbelievable, but in the Philippines there really is a detention facility that exists solely for children. And we're not talking about teenagers who are almost 18. We mean little kids. Children who should actually be in elementary school, in kindergarten, and most of all, with their parents. Today we're showing you this shocking facility, and we'll explain why something this cruel even exists. When we talk about the Children's Detention Center, we mean the Philippine Juvenile Detention Center, Bahay Pag-asa. By the way, Bahay Pag-asa translates to House of Hope. That might sound nice, but the only real hope is to get out as quickly as possible. Because while in most countries youth detention facilities focus on rehabilitating minors, the 7, 8 or 10-year-olds in Bahay Pag-asa are simply locked away. And locked away together with countless others inside tiny barred cells without any comforts at all. There's hardly any activities or any form of variety. How unbelievably harsh everyday life is in what is probably the world's only detention center for children becomes clear very early in the morning. At 5 a.m. to be exact, because at this exact time, the children are woken up by the guards and supervisors, and this is when the children's daily struggle begins. Although the night itself could also be considered also a struggle. Many sleep inside the cells packed tightly side by side on the cold, bare concrete floor. Even the toughest detention facilities in the United States would feel like luxury compared to Bahay Pag-asa. After the children are roughly awakened from their sleep, they are sent to the washrooms early in the morning. These rooms, just like the cells, were designed for far fewer inmates, and there are nowhere near enough toilets and sinks for everyone. Clean water and soap are also scarce. Because everyone is stressed and tense, the catastrophic conditions regularly lead to conflict. And so, in Bahay Pag-asa, the law of the strongest usually rules. This means only those who can fight their way past the others get to wash themselves or use a toilet. Everyone has to hurry anyway because by 6:30 a.m. they're forced back into their cells where breakfast is served. And that is truly nothing to look forward to, because for the first meal of the day, Bahay Pag-asa usually provides only a small portion of rice and maybe a piece of dried fish or a thin soup. The children have to eat this meager meal sitting on the floor of their cells. And again, the smaller and weaker kids suffer the most. Since portions are limited, stronger or older inmates, the so-called mayores, often take extra food for themselves or steal it from the weaker ones. From 8 a.m. until around 11 a.m., official government guidelines say that the inmates should receive school lessons. That might sound positive at first, but there's a big problem. These lessons simply never happen. But why not? The Philippine government actually intends for Bahay Pag-asa to detain children, but also to support them. They're supposed to get good meals, loving guidance from supervisors, and a proper education. The problem is this extremely poor country simply cannot afford this vision. And so the facilities lack almost everything. There are almost never proper caregivers. There are no teachers. And not even enough food for everyone. And so the required lessons never take place. Instead, the children spend the entire morning left to themselves in the cells or in the overcrowded courtyards. There are no meaningful activities. And so it's not surprising that this idle time becomes completely dominated by internal hierarchies. Younger or newly arrived children usually have to perform services for the older ones in the mornings. For example, washing their clothes, massaging them, or serving as their errand boys. Anyone who refuses is bullied, physically harmed, or even worse, as former inmate Jerry recalls, who was locked up in Bahay Pag-asa at just 11 years old simply because he violated a curfew. The fear of the older inmates shapes the entire morning for the children. They cannot rely on help from the staff. Guards usually don't intervene, either because they are overwhelmed or because some of them are even part of the violent hierarchy themselves. The rest of the day is just as monotonous. From 12 to 1 p.m, there's a meager lunch. And just like breakfast, It's terrible, usually just some rice with a hint of sauce. Many of the children are severely underweight because they eventually cannot swallow the food anymore. After lunch, the entire afternoon should, according to official guidelines, be filled with meaningful activities like sports, vocational programs, or psychological support. But as you can probably guess, reality looks completely different here too. For hundreds of traumatized children, there is only one psychologist, meaning it's almost impossible to get an appointment, and the other planned programs almost never take place. Instead, the children sit literally on top of each other until 5 p.m. with nothing to do, which naturally encourages aggression and bullying. In the heat and cramped conditions of the Philippine facility, combined with poor hygiene, skin diseases like scabies, tuberculosis, and respiratory infections spread quickly. Medical care is only available if you get lucky. Just as bleak as the entire day, dinner at 5 p.m. is just as scarce and low quality as the other meals. Afterward, all inmates are locked back into their cells and nighttime begins. And even though it's hard to believe, this is the worst time in Bahay Pag-asa. Because once the lights are switched off, the guards no longer check the cells. And under the cover of darkness, younger inmates are completely helpless against serious mistreatment and abuse from older youths. Reports from NGOs confirm that these horrible conditions in Bahay Pag-asa are the daily reality.
They are locked inside, so many, overcrowding in a small space. They don't have beds in most of these places. They sleep on the concrete floor. There's many places the toilets are full of dirt and stuffed up. There's no running water. They only shower sometimes twice a week if they're allowed.
Out of fear that the stronger kids will harm them, many of the children barely sleep, huddle together, or try to hide in corners, though that is nearly impossible given the extreme overcrowding. The worst time in Bahay Pag-asa only ends at 5 a.m. when wake-up begins again, and this repeats day after day. And for most inmates, this continues for months or even years. Many of the children are locked up there without ever seeing a judge or receiving legal assistance. They also have no idea how long they'll have to stay in Bahay Pag-asa. You are now probably thinking, how is this possible? And what offences could 8, 9 or 10-year-olds have committed to deserve such a fate? Which brings us to the why, and perhaps the most shocking truth about the Philippine children's detention centres. Because in reality, many of these kids are actually innocent. They did not commit serious offences that would justify imprisonment, especially at such a young age. Many of the child inmates are locked up only because of relatively minor offences. They were accused of stealing food or violating nighttime curfews, just like this little boy. Nine-year-old Denny, whom you're seeing here, ended up in detention only because he stole 6 cans of sardines out of hunger. Some of the inmates were also exploited by criminal gangs as illegal substance couriers. Since it is easier for the justice system to detain the children than to catch the masterminds, the kids end up serving the sentences while the organized criminal networks continue operating without consequence. But if the children are more or less innocent and often only committed small offences out of pure desperation, why are they locked up in one of the harshest facilities imaginable? To understand that, you have to understand the situation in the Philippines itself. The country has a kind of two-class society. There are children from regular middle and upper-class families, and then there are the so-called street children. Kids whose parents live in the slums of the big cities, or children who no longer even have parents and roam the streets of Manila as homeless orphans. Almost all inmates in the facility are street children who steal out of sheer necessity to survive. These are kids who should actually be helped through social programs instead of being locked away under inhumane conditions. However, the Philippine government is radically nationalistic and populist. Street children are seen as an eyesore, and politicians often refer to them as undesirables that must be cleaned from the streets. That is easier and cheaper than addressing the real problems that cause so many street children to exist in the first place. In the big cities, there are thousands of street children whose parents passed away or who fled violent homes. There is no social safety net or state support for them, so they have no choice but to live on the streets, fend for themselves, and inevitably become involved in petty offences. To give the public the impression that they are cracking down on criminal activity, the government frequently orders raids to clean the cityscape. During these clean-up operations, officers roam the streets and hunt down street kids. The children often try to hide under bridges or in other hard-to-reach places. Just like this group of kids you're seeing now. Every day they risk dangerous climbs just to find a somewhat safe place to sleep where the police cannot catch them. Arrests are often completely arbitrary, and not only for things like stealing food, but also for offences like begging or loitering. Simply being outside at night is already enough to be arrested for violating the curfew. After the arrest, the children are simply packed into trucks and taken directly to Bahay Pag-asa. In the end, the government only cares about presenting a clean city image. Philippine politics has no interest in addressing why so many children in the country must live harsh lives as street kids, or how to fight the root causes of their poverty. As long as the children are locked away en masse, voters get the impression that the government is taking strong action against criminal activity, and that's all the politicians care about.